World War II, more than 35,000 American airmen became prisoners of war in the European theater. While downed flyers in Europe were treated better than those held in the Pacific, they still faced deprivation, occasional abuse, harsh winters, and the psychological trials of being a POW. Here at the National D-Day Memorial, we often share the story of one of those American prisoners of war, Lieutenant Robert Payne, and of his loyal canine companion, Thunderbolt. Born in 1916 in Connecticut, Payne grew up in Springfield, Massachusetts. After developing a keen interest in flying in his 20s, he earned his pilot's license in 1937. When war broke out in Europe in 1939, Payne was eager to do his part and enlisted in the Royal Canadian Air Force. In 1941, the U.S. entered the war, and Payne swapped the Canadian uniform for one of the U.S. Army Air Forces, training to fly B-17 bombers. Like so many American fighting men, before he shipped out, Payne had personal business to see completed. In May 1943, just before leaving for his assignment in England, he married Rosamond. Stationed in England with the 385th Bomb Group, Payne became the co-pilot of a B-17 called Gremlin Buggy.
Story goes that one day while Payne was at a pub in England, he started feeding scraps of food to a stray dog, and from that point on the two just became inseparable. Payne named the dog Thunderbolt after the escort fighters that guarded his plane on combat missions. Even on training flights, Payne would take the dog along with him in the cockpit, but on combat flights, he left him behind, and on those days, Thunderbolt would lie down by the runway and very patiently wait for his master to return.
One day in November 1943, the plane did not return. Payne's B-17 had been shot down over Germany, and he was taken prisoner. Thunderbolt kept waiting. Soon, he became a legend in England for faithfully standing sentinel at the airfield week after week. Only when Payne's friend, Mess Officer Bob Lipsett, took over his care was the loyal canine lured away.
POWs like Bob Payne were allowed to get mail on occasion, but an active duty soldier like Bob Lipsett was not allowed to write directly to him because sensitive information might fall into German hands. So Lipsett began a correspondence with Rose Payne back in Massachusetts. He would send updates about Thunderbolt, and she would then relay that information and even sent a picture to Payne so that Thunderbolt could keep him company.
While his master waited out the war, Thunderbolt became legendary by 1944, rumored to have had many adventures. As with other wartime legends, there are varying accounts of Thunderbolt's days in the war, and not all details are easily confirmed. In one story, the dog, with his new master, Lipsett, crossed the channel a couple of days after D-Day and was nearly lost when an enemy shell blew him out of the landing craft. He swam ashore and rejoined Lipsett, only to be wounded later during the Battle of the Bulge and treated by a dog-loving Army medic. Sometime in 1945, Thunderbolt separated from his caretaker, appeared at an airbase looking for Payne, or at least that is what the air crews believed. Embellished or not, the story of Thunderbolt became well known, recounted in newspapers and a popular post-war comic book.
Payne, of course, was released from the POW camp at the end of the war and came back to the United States, but he was still on active duty and so was stationed in Florida. He found out that his dog was still alive and well at his old air base in England, and Payne was able to make contact with a sympathetic Red Cross official who arranged for him to be shipped back on the Queen Mary to the United States. Rose Payne met Thunderbolt at the pier in New York and took him home, and it was some weeks later that Robert Payne was reunited with his faithful canine buddy. And at that point, they became inseparable once again. Thunderbolt lived out the rest of his days at Robert Payne's farm.
The story of Payne and his faithful dog is only one out of millions that came from the war, and like so many others, it is hard to know where truth ends and legend begins. Yet for untold numbers, it was a story that mattered. How often did a lonely soldier read about Thunderbolt and think of the beloved dog he left in the backyard? How often did a mother with a son overseas imagine her boy had such a companion too? How often did an airman recount the tale to his buddies as a reminder that there was something waiting on the other side of combat? Payne and Thunderbolt brought moments of happiness and flashes of hope, a record worth preserving.
Thunderbolt waited patiently for Lieutenant Payne at the airfield during World War II, but these days you'll find him here, waiting to greet visitors along the Ridgway-Deming walking trail at the National D-Day Memorial. While enjoying the serene woodland environment at our 50-acre site, visitors can stop along the trail to take in education stations with information about how natural resources on the home front helped to win the war for the Allies. And right there at each stop, there's Thunderbolt, looking every bit the World War II aviator in his bomber jacket and pilot's cap, with special messages for our youngest visitors. Kids of all ages can pick up our educational brochure featuring Thunderbolt, full of fun, age-appropriate activities to complete together as you learn along the trail. Thunderbolt is just one of the ways we're reaching the next generation at the memorial. Each year, our education team hosts thousands of school-aged children on field trips and at educational camps. For those who can't get to Bedford, we bring the memorial to them through virtual field trips, tours, and programs. And students and teachers unpack our traveling trunks, filled with war-era artifacts and lessons in classrooms across the country. More information on all the memorial's learning resources for families and educators is waiting for you online at dday.org.